Okay, so finally we can start creating a project with Next.js. So creating an application with Next, and React, of course, it's pretty straightforward. So of course we will need a project so we can learn how to use it. And I've created a directory. I'm already inside the directory. I called it project number 1. You can call it whatever you want. It doesn't matter. And I'm going to handle everything from the integrated terminal of the VS Code, because you might be on a Windows computer, and if I bring the terminal, the integrated terminal with the Mac OS, it looks a little bit different than the Windows, and it's much better. But again, I'm just going to use this terminal so I can cover most computers. Okay, so if you go to the web and you type for nextjs.org. Let me see if I can find it right here. If you type this next and then JS, you're going to get right here the first result. So if you go to the application, my internet right now, it's a little bit, my connection is a little bit slow. So notice it's still loading. So if you go to this website, you're going to find all the information you need for Next.js. Now, you're going to get two options at the top. The home, it's pretty simple. So the one you're going to be using the most is going to be the docs. So if you go to the docs, you're going to get pretty much an example of what you can do with Next.js and, different examples. So we're going to cover pretty much everything we have right here, pretty much. But of course, we're going to do it together right here. Okay, so how can we start? Well, again, we just need a project, and then on the integrated terminal, if you need to navigate to that project, and we need to create node applications. Right, so we're going to do npm init. That's the first step. So I'm going to do npm init, and it's going to ask me, what's the name of the project. I'm going to keep pressing enter until it's done, the usual way. I'm going to say yes, and then press enter, and it's done. Okay, I need to update the npm, but that's okay. So once this is done, of course, you're going to get the package.json. Now we're going to do everything together. I'm not going to give you a package.json so you can download and put it on your computer, on your project, and then do npm install and download everything, because I want for you and I to do everything together on the screen. I don't want to give you some already built code. We're going to do everything together. So with Next.js, of course, you're gonna get you don't get a CLI like you will get with React. We create a React app. We don't get something like this. What we do npm install. We install Next as a dependency, React, of course, because we will need it, and then we do React DOM. We don't get a CLI. So this is what we need to do: npm install, save, and the rest. Okay, so that's what I'm gonna do. I'm going to press enter, pause the video because my connection is a little bit slow, and I'll be right back whenever this is done. Okay, so everything was installed, so I'm going to do clear. So as you can see, we are starting very, very clean right here, right? Very, very clean. Okay, so first what we'll need is to render some content on the screen. That's the final purpose of doing all of this. So we need to create a server. So Next.js, of course, comes with that server. Comes with a built-in server. Now, to do that, to run that Next.js server, what we need to do is we need to modify the scripts on the package.json. We need to let node know that we want to trigger the next server. So I'm gonna go right here. I'm gonna delete this, and we're gonna add just 3 different commands. First is gonna be the dev. The dev is gonna be the development environment for our server. The testing server. Whenever you're done, you're going to run a build, to create a build of your project so you can upload it to, to the real server. So I'm going to do next and then build. And then, we have the start. So we're going to do start, start. And it's pretty much the same idea, next, start. So again, notice that we are starting very clean. We do everything by hand. We are not doing everything with the CLI. Okay, so now the next step is to render something. So right here, we cannot do whatever we want. We cannot create an SRC like we would do with create React app, or maybe a components directory. So what we need to do is we need to add a directory that Next is going to look right here. It's going to look to your root, and it's going to look for that directory. And this works just like a PHP server, a PHP application. If you want for your PHP, maybe, I don't know, Laravel or something like that, you would add a directory right here called pages. Well, Next works pretty much the same way. We need to add a directory called pages. So when we trigger the Next server, Next is going to go to your root and try to find the pages. Okay, that's good. So whenever you create an application, most of the times your home is going to be your index.html. So again, right here, same idea. So I'm going to create index.html. Oh, sorry, an index.js. We are working with JavaScript. Sorry for that. So okay, so we have our index, and this is going to be home. So right here, we can start creating our own application. So I'm going to do the usual. I'm going to import React from React, and I'm going to create a class-based component. You should do the same. So I'm going to bring component, all right? And it's going to be from React, of course, from, and then React. Okay. So then, of course, what we need to do is we need to create a class. And right now, we're going to create some DOM content. Then, of course, we're going to make this application a little bit better. And that's the only thing we are not going to do together on the course. When we are talking about JavaScript and React, we do everything together. But if we need to add a lot of classes like styles from CSS, I'm going to give you the file so we don't waste time doing CSS. Because again, this is not a CSS course. So I'm going to do a render and a return. And we're going to return, I'm going to do some fragments. And this is from React, the latest version of React. So I'm going to add an H1, and this one is going to say, welcome to my page, whatever, doesn't matter. Okay, so I'm going to do export, then default, and of course, we export default to home. So now by default, when we start the server, Next is going to go to pages, and it's going to say, oh, okay, so this index.js is going to be my home. So whenever I get a request in my server, my local host 3000, I'm going to look for this index.js. All right, so how do we run the Next server? Just like we did right here. We just do npm run dev, and we're going to start the development server for Next.js. Okay, so I'm going to go and do npm run and then dev. So I'm going to press enter. Of course, it's going to take, the first time that it runs, it's going to take a little bit of time. Okay, so after this is done, notice that it says ready on server localhost 3000. So by default, it's going to go to 3000. And notice that by default, it's creating a directory that it's using for this development server. So I'm going to copy the localhost. I'm going to go here and notice that the application right here on the terminal, it's going to go a little bit crazy because it will detect the server, the request. So if we go here, of course, we get welcome to my page. Now, if we go to index.js and I, whatever, I'm going to say guys, and I'm going to save this file, this is going to enable the hot reloading. So by default, you get hot reloading. So before we go to the next section, I'm going to show you something else. I'm going to go to the tools, I'm going to go to inspect, and I'm going to show you the network tab. So if we go to the network, of course, and I reload the page, you're going to get information about all the, everything that is happening on this request. So the first one is going to be localhost, which is the request for our application for this index.js. So if you go to localhost, you're going to get, again, all the information. And if you go to response, you're going to get, the example of what are you getting. So notice that we are getting the unbundled version of the React component that we are rendering. We are getting the div with the next, of course, and then we are getting the H1 with all the meta tags and everything else that Next it's using. But we are getting the unbundled version. If Next would be working in our computer, in this server, we would get the div with the root and the bundle.js. And again, we don't get that because that's the main purpose with Next.js to do server-side rendering. So we are getting the unbundled version. And now we know that this really works. All right, so it's a good start. Again, we're going to do everything. Everything is going to be pretty simple at the beginning, and the videos are going to be short, but then this is going to get, a lot more challenging. All right, but first we're going to start easy, baby steps. Okay, so let's go to the next one. Okay, so what if I wanted to add more pages? Right now we have just an index.js, and we know that Next will get that file to render, localhost, to render home. But what if I wanted to add an about or maybe a contact route? We would need to create a routes file like we would do with the React router. Well, not really. So since Next is going to be listening for the pages directory, if we add a file right here that says contact, it will go and create a route in your server that, it's going to listen for that location. So, let's kind of do it. So I'm going to go to pages. I'm going to add a contact, contact.js, and I'm going to add one more just for fun. So a new file, and I'm going to do the about. Of course, we are not going to do a lot of content right now. So I'm going to go to the index, and I'm going to, copy everything just to, to do this fast. And this one is going to be contact, and this one, of course, contact, and this one is going to say contact. All right. So I'm going to copy all of this, and this one is going to be the about. So about, and this one as well, about, and then of course about. So now notice that we just created the about and the contact files. Now, if of course I reload the application and I go to contact, we're gonna get the contact, the contact route. So again, Next, it's pretty smart when we talk about this. It knows that you have a file, so it's going to say, oh, okay, so this dude has a file, so I'm assuming that this is a route. So it goes and render that route for you. So what if you have more complex routes? Let's say that maybe you have a users section, and inside users, you have something with an index, of course, something like this, and then you have a profile file. So of course, if you can add directories right here, and Next will know about this. So let's, do it in practice. So I'm going to go to pages, and I'm going to create a new directory, and I'm going to call this users. Now, again, users, since it's a new directory, we will need an index file. And this index.js is going to be what's going to get rendered if you go to localhost / and then just users. Then if you want to go to a section inside users, let's say profile, so something like this, profile.js, this is going to be localhost / users / and then profile. All right. So right from the start, you can just start creating all the layout of your application, and you will get a working project with all your routes. That's actually very good news. So I'm going to go to the index, and I'm going to do pretty much the same thing. I'm going to go to the index of users, of course, and I'm going to say users, something like that. And then, of course, right here, I'm going to say users. And on the other one, again, I'm going to call it profile. All right, profile and then profile. Okay, so if I save this, I'm going to reload the application. And of course, if we go to users, we're going to get the users. And if we go to users / profile, just like this, we're going to get the profile. So again, right from the start, we avoid using React router. Now everything is being handled by Next.js. Right, so in your application, probably you will get just a header so you can navigate to different sections. Right now, we are just doing everything, manually. And in real life, that's not the way it works. Of course, you will add a nav with a header with all your links. So again, we are just going to try to reproduce that. Let me just close all of this. I don't want them. I just want the index.js that we get inside pages. Just going to go there and add a nav. All right, so I'm going to go here and say, okay, so I want a nav. Let me just first wrap it on a div. I'm going to create a div, right? And inside I'm going to put a nav, and I'm going to say, okay, so if we are at home, I want to go to that link, which is going to be home. And then of course, this one is going to be called home. Again, I'm not teaching you anything new. I'm going to copy paste, and we're going to go to contact. Then we're going to go to about us, and this one is going to be just users. I'm not going to do the profile right now. So I'm going to do contact. We're going to do to about, and we're going to go to users. All right. So if I save this and try to and check this, and I'm going to do this so we can have some spacing. Sorry for that. So there we go. All right. I'm going to save it. I'm going to go here, and of course, it's a little bit better. So we get the nav, right? So if I go to home, we should be going to home. And notice that that happens. If I go to contact, we go to contact. And if I go to about us, of course we go and then users. All right, so we know that that works. Now, what is the problem? Notice that every time I go to a new link, the application, it's really reloading. So I go here, I go to a different one, it reloads, and it's trying to get whatever content we have inside that. And that's not the way it works. Why using Next and a single page application if you're going to be reloading the page all the time? So that's not what we want to do right here. So we get a different way of adding links, just like you would do with React Router. This is the same idea. With React Router, you need to use the link component that comes with React Router. If you don't use it, you're going to be reloading the page, and the main purpose of using a single page application just go to wastes. So in this case, we get the same idea from Next. We get a new component called Next and then link. So I'm going to import link from, and this one is going to be from Next, just like this, / and then link. And that's it. So of course, since we've got Next installed in our computer, it's going to get it from there. So now this one, it works just a little bit weird. This it's not just like React Router. So first thing we need to do is we need to wrap the actual link inside the link component, right? That's why we are bringing this at the top. So I'm going to go here and put the link that we have, the real link, inside of that component. Now the one in charge to navigate to that section is going to be the link component. So we need to remove the href from there, and we need to put it on the actual link component. But the different thing right here is that we need to leave the a tag inside the link. If we remove it, it's going to work, but again, we should put the a tag. That's the way it really works. So I'm going to pretty much do the same thing with the other ones. So I'm going to do it like this. I'm going to do link, then the closing. And this one, I'm going to, of course, add an a tag, and you should do the same. So I'm going to go here, I'm going to say A, and A. And I'm, of course, doing this the normal way. I'm not using shortcuts, because maybe you're not using shortcuts and you don't know how to use it, and you will need to pause the video and then go back. So I much prefer doing it like this. Okay, so now we have our link component and we get our a tag. So if I go to home, I'm gonna reload the application, we get it. And if I go to contact, notice that the application, it's not reloading. It's stacking the requests. First we get localhost, then we went to contact. So on the same application, on the same instance, we are getting, and let me see if I can remove this, we are getting the contact request. And this is what we are getting. And notice that it's not reloading. Let's go to users, we get the same thing. If we go to about us, we get the same thing. The application is not reload. So this is the way we get to navigate through different components or different sections or routes inside our application. All right. Now, again, this makes sense. And again, this is not what we're going to do in real life. In real life, what you do is you create a header where you have the nav, and then you use that file and you include it on different sections, so you don't have to copy paste this component, this code on all your routes. That's the way we do it in real life. Now for this, we will need to create a new component, and we need to learn about how to include components from inside Next. All right, so let's go to the next one and do that. Okay, so the problem we have right now is that we want to create a header, and we want to grab that header and put it on pretty much all the routes, and we don't want to copy paste through all the routes. That's not the way we do it. So of course we can include our own component on different sections. Now maybe you're thinking, okay, so maybe if Next it's that smart, we should be adding a file inside pages, or maybe a directory called header, and Next will detect it. All right, so let's give it a try. So I'm going to go to new file, and I'm going to create a header.js. Again, makes sense. Has the word header. And I'm going to import React from React. So import React from React. And notice I'm not doing component because I'm going to create a functional component. And so it's I'm going to call it header, of course. This one is going to be equal to just a dump function. And we're going to return some JSX. So I'm going to use the new fragments, just like this. And inside, I'm not going to do everything again. I'm just going to copy this. I'm going to just copy, and I'm going to delete this from here. I'm going to go and paste it right here. Let me make it a little bit better. And okay, it didn't work, but that's okay. Okay. So now, of course, we have a component called header, and we should be able to grab this component and include it on different places. That's the idea. So let me do the export default and then header. All right, we are done. So export, and I'm going to pretty much bring the same link, and I'm going to delete it from here and put it right here at the top. So this component, it's ready to be used. So if I go to index.js, we should be, thinking, well, okay, so should I can include this, import it, and then, use it? Yeah, well, in theory, you can. I'm going to say import, and I'm going to say header, and I'm going to import it from .. I'm going to go, .. I'm going to go to header. All right. So if I go here and include the component from here, we are going to get it, of course. All right. So if I reload the application, of course, we get the component. And if I go to this section, it really works, right? So, really, really simple. Really, really simple. Now, even though this works, this is not the way we should do this. This is actually a mistake. I've seen this on different examples, and this is not the way we do things, or you should do it. Because when you add a file right here, Next is going to think that this is an actual route. And actually I can prove this. If we go to header, the route header, we are getting the header component. So now users can go to that route and just get the header. So this is not the way we should do this, all right? So what we need to do is to create a component that it's not inside the pages. It's not inside pages because Next is not that smart. And we need to include that component inside our files. We can do this. And this works just like standard React. We need to go to the root directory, and you will need to create a new directory called, I don't know, src or components or whatever you want to call it in the React world. So I'm going to go and call it components. And again, by convention, it's called components. So inside components, you can use whatever structure you want. In this case, I'm going to create a new directory, and inside includes, I'm going to put the header and the footer and that kind of files. So I'm going to go right here and create this header.js. And of course, I'm not going to type everything again. I'm just going to I'm going to copy, I'm going to paste, and I'm going to go to pages and delete the header. All right, so I'm going to move it to trash. So now, of course, we have a file, we have a component that just renders the header, and it's not related to pages. So now inside index, the only thing I need to do is just change the reference to this file. So it's .. /components include and then header. So if I save this, we get a 404 for the header because the route does not exist anymore. But if we go to home, we are, getting the header. So this is the way you should use. And now this works for the header, but this works with whatever you want. Let's say that maybe you have a reusable component like a button or a calendar or maybe a widget, whatever you want to use. You just put it inside components and then you consume it from there, just like the header. Now we have a different problem. Now if we want to include the header on different files, notice that if I go to contact, we don't get the header. We will need to copy the import, go to contact, paste the import, and then put the reference to the header on top of this. And again, this is not the best way to do it because you will need to do a lot of typing, and as your application grows, bigger, it's going to be hard to maintain. So of course we have a much easier resource with this. And if you come from PHP or maybe Laravel or any CMS that you get with PHP, you create something that it's called layout. And of course on single page application we create layouts. So with the layout, what we will do, we will wrap pretty much whatever route we want to render inside this layout, and we just, we will include whatever we want. Header, footer, links, whatever we want, and we do it just once. We will still need to do, we need to import some component that will wrap pretty much everything else. And we will use layouts for this. So let's go to the next one and let's create our first layout. Okay, so now we're going to talk about layouts. We're going to create our first layout. And a layout, it's something that you will use at least once in your application. And layouts are not some magical components we include from Next. This is something that we just create like a regular React component, just like the header. Okay, so I'm going to go to components. I'm going to create a new directory, and I'm going to call it layouts. Now you might have many layouts in your application. In this case, I'm just going to use once, which is going to be my main layout. And of course, you can call this whatever you want. So this one is just going to be a component, a functional component that returns some JSX. And that JSX is going to be, whatever JSX component, but with the props that children. Now, if you don't know how props and children's, or you don't know what that is, it's because you need to learn a little bit more about React. So at the end of the course, you have an optional section that says, it says optional, I believe, where you get a full React course. So you're getting 2 courses for the price of 1. So if you don't know a lot of React, just go to that course, learn everything about React, and then just come back to this. Okay, so I'm going to keep moving forward. I'm going to do import React, and then of course from React, and then React. All right, let me, there we go. And then of course we need to create a functional component. So I'm going to say const, and I'm going to call it main layout. And this is going to be just a functional component where we return some JSX. Since we get fragments right now, I'm going to use fragments. We should use it. And then at the end, what we're going to do, what we always do, we return props to children. So since we are using props, I'm going to be getting the props. So props and then children. And then of course we need to export then default and then main layout. All right, so this component, it's done. So now if we want to include or use this main layout from different files, we will need to import it just like we did with header. So I'm gonna start over right here, import main layout, and it's gonna be from / components layout and main layout. So now what do? We just wrap our whole application or whatever content that you want to render with this within this main layout. Now I'm doing it inside of fragments. You could, skip this. So okay, so let me fix this. All right, there we go. So now notice that everything is working, and if I go to my application, we are getting, the content that we are wrapping within the main layout because we are, returning the prompts to children. And again, if you're getting confused, go to the final section. So now what we can do, we can grab this header and put it, but instead of each route, we're going to put it inside of the main layout. That's the purpose of doing all of this. So I'm going to go and say import. We're going to create the header from /, we go to includes and we bring the header. And now I'm going to go here and I'm going to say that before the props the children, I want to make a reference to this header, usual stuff, usual React stuff. So now if I save it and reload the application, we are getting the header by default. All right. So you can add whatever you want right here. All right. This is just the layout. Now I'm going to go to the header and I'm going to add an h1 tag, and we're going to change this in the future. But for now, I'm just going to, do it like this. So it's going to be h1, of course. h1, and this one is going to say my app.com. Doesn't matter. All right, it's just to get a title, right? Okay. So now maybe you noticed, maybe you didn't, that if we want to include the header on different sections, we will still need to do import and wrap our whole application within the main layout. We still need to do that. Now I'm going to do it, but later I'm going to remove this. I'm going to close this as well. I'm going to go to contact and pretty much do the same thing. Now we're going to do it just like this. And it's kind of a bummer because you will still need to include and do a lot of typing. Now, just let me, I got to tell you that we have a better way to do this. We have a much better way to do this. And this is just like we would do with React Router. You create the routes, you bring the browser router, and you put whatever you want. And then everything is going to get reflected on different routes. So we get with Next a different way of doing things, but it's much more advanced. We will get to that way of including one main layout and get it on all the different routes. But we are not there yet. We're gonna do it later. For now, I'm just gonna complete this. I'm gonna do the import on pretty much all the other pages so we can have something. Later, we're gonna kind of remove it. If you don't want to do it, that's okay. If you don't want to do it, I'm not gonna stop you. So let me finish this. And okay, we get the about. Let me reload the application. I'm gonna go to contact. We get the header. We get the about. And I'm just gonna do it on the index of users as well. So I'm gonna go here. I'm gonna do main layout. I'm gonna copy all of this, and we are almost done. So okay. Now notice that this main layout, it's on a different path. So it's ... 2 directories up. So if we go to users, now we get the header. All right. So remember, we get a better way to do this, but we are going to get there much later. So first, I want to talk about something else that it's much more related to Next, and it's really, really cool and really important. So let's go to the next one and talk about that. Okay, so now we know a little bit of Next.js, and we know a little bit of how it works. But, so far, nothing is really awesome or really, really cool. So we're going to talk on the next couple sections, we're going to talk about lifecycle hooks and initial props. And this is something from Next.js, not React. Everything is going to be related to Next.js. And I'm pretty sure you're going to say, okay, that's why, people is using Next.js for server-side rendering. It's really, really awesome. So with every section we create inside pages, we have access to something called initial props. And again, this is just Next, not React. So when the initial props kicks in at the very beginning of things, and this is going to kick in before the constructor. Let me just show you, something more visual. I'm going to close everything. We don't need it. I'm going to go to the class home. So if you know a little bit of JavaScript or maybe React, you know that at the first, when you create a class, the first thing that's going to trigger is something called the constructor. So when the constructor kicks in, you can run some code. Now inside the constructor, you're going to get the super. Right, and inside of here, you can do maybe a console .log, and I'm going to say constructor so we can know that this got triggered from the constructor. And then I'm going to pretty much grab the same console log, but this time I'm going to do it on the render. So when the application, this component starts in our screen, this one is going to get triggered first because this one gets triggered before any of the, any other code, and then we're going to get the render. So I'm going to save it. I'm going to go to the console right here, and I'm going to reload the application. I'm going to go to home, of course. I'm going to go to home, and now we can see that first the constructor, triggers first, and then, we get the render. So this is how, JavaScript works, how class-based component works. Now we have a feature called get initial props, and this is from Next. So this get initial props is going to get triggered before any of this code, even before the constructor. So how can we use it? Well, we need to go right at the beginning. It doesn't matter anyways, you can put it whatever you want, but you will need to start with the keyword static. And then, get initial and then props, just like this. Now this one is just a function. Now I'm going to do pretty much the same idea. I'm going to say console log and initial props. So if I save this, you're going to see, let me just reload the application, and we are going to get an error, and that it's cool. We should get an error. It says should resolve to an object. So get initial props that it's from Next should always, always, always return an object. So I'm going to go here and I'm going to fix this. How can we fix it? Well, we just need to return an object. It doesn't matter if we have some data or not. We always need to return something at least. So if I reload the application again, we can see that we have the constructor and we have the render. So we are not getting the console log initial props. But if you go to the terminal, you can see that we've actually rendered twice. We are getting the initial props at the beginning, then the constructor, and then the render. So we are getting it right here on the terminal, but not on the browser. And this makes sense. This get initial props, it's something from Next, and Next, it's server. So this get initial props will get triggered before anything on the server. And now there's something that really important that you need to understand. Whenever you work with Next.js, your code runs on the server and then runs on the browser. So Next.js is executing all of this code on the server, behind the scenes. And once everything is ready, then it's going to go to the browser. And that's why we are rendering and executing this information, but not with the get initial props, because this is something for the server. So cool. So what is the point of getting, having this feature, the get initial props? Why should we use it? So let me just give you a dumb example. I'm going to go to the return, and I'm going to say that I want to return just an object with the user inside. And this user is going to get a name of Francis and a last name of course, Jones. If you know me from different courses, I always use the same example. So this Francis Jones, the get initial props is returning an object with the user and with name Francis and last name of Jones. Okay, so now the point of doing all of this is that the server, after executing all this information, what is going to do Next.js, what it's going to do is going to grab this object and inject it as props in the actual component. Yeah, really cool. So I'm going to go here and instead of doing maybe the constructor, I'm going to do this props at user, and I'm going to do it here first. I'm going to say that props that user. So we are injecting props with a user that has some data. Now, if I try to render this and reload the application, we are getting name Francis and last name Jones. So the Next.js, it's injecting this object as props. So we could use it from the very first render of our component. Really, really cool. Now, of course, we can still do this on the constructor, but remember that on the constructor, we need to, let me do it right here. This is actually going to fail because we need to be passing props. And remember that the constructor needs to get access to the props. So if we reload the application, we are getting it twice. Once from the constructor and the other one from the render, right? Really, really cool. So now what you can do, you can even use this props that user on the state. So I'm going to say that state, create a user for this. I'm going to say that the user is equal to that props and then user. And instead of doing console log that props, I'm going to say that state. And of course, we will get pretty much the same result. We go to user and we get the information that get initial props from the server. It's injected into our component. All right, really, really cool stuff. Okay, so again, you might be thinking, okay, this is really cool, but why should we use this? In which scenario I should apply this get initial props? Well, we can use it pretty much the whole time, and you get a lot of scenarios where you can use it, but there is one perfect scenario, which is the most common one, just the network request. So in your application, most of the times, you will make a network request to get some data, and that data, you're going to use it, you're going to grab the data, and then of course create your component using that data. So in this case, we could make a network request on the getInitialProps that is going to get handled by the server, and whenever that request is done, you're going to return an object with whatever data you got from the request, and that information will get injected as props, so you can use it right away. You don't need to use a lifecycle from React because your data is going to be ready when the application starts on the browser. Really, really cool. Okay, so let's just do it right now. I'm going to make a request to JSON placeholder. If you don't know it, you need to search for JSON placeholder. So this is just a project we can use where we get a fake online REST API. So we can make a request to JSON placeholder and we will get a response with some data. So just go to this section, go to this web page, and you're gonna get a lot of examples how you can use it with fetch and everything else. And on the resources, you get different places where you can go. For example, right now I want to bring users. So if I go to this location / and users, I will get a JSON response. And if I do /1, I'm gonna get the information about the user with ID number 1. So this is really, really cool. And of course, this is just for testing. Okay, so I want to make a request to JSON placeholder, and I want to bring the user number 1. All right, so I'm gonna make the request from here. And once we get the information, I want to return an object, which ultimately will go to the this.state.user. Okay, so I want to use Axios. I'm not going to use fetch. I'm not a very big fan of fetch. If you want to use fetch, that's okay by me. I'm going to use Axios. So I'm going to install it. Of course, we need to install. This is not a React or Next.js dependency. So npm install, then -- save. And I'm going to install Axios. It's going to take just a second. Okay, so everything was installed. So I'm going to do npm run dev one more time, and we're going to do the actual request. So notice that when the application starts, everything starts, I am getting a console log of username Francis and last name Jones. And this is coming from the actual render. This is the console log, this.state. Remember this. So then what I want to do, I want to make a request on the getInitialProps. And remember that if I do something right here and I do a console log from the getInitialProps, it will display on the server and not on the client, right? The only purpose of using this is so we can pass it as props. All right. So since we've installed Axios, I'm going to import it first. So import Axios from Axios. All right. And I'm going to go to the initial props, and I'm just going to create a variable where we're going to host this request. So this one is going to be equal to Axios, and then we're going to do a get request. Now the location of where we're going to do this is going to be to this location. You can make a request to whatever you want. If you want to make a request to users, you can go to users or maybe a different place. In this example, I'm just going to go to users. Now, of course, this request is going to return a promise, right? Okay. So I'm going to do then to catch the promise. That promise will return a response. So at the end of the request, the only thing we want to do is to console log the response.data. Right. So what we're going to get is a response with the user number 1. We should be getting something like this. Okay. So if we go, I reload the application, save it, it's going to hot reload everything. And I go to my project. What I should be getting is at first a console log with this data, which is the JSON placeholder, and then I'm going to get a console log with the this.state that it's equal to username Francis and Jones. That's what we should get, right? Okay. So I'm going to reload the application, and I'm going to go to the terminal, and we can see that we are getting the data about the user. But notice that we are getting first the console log of this.state, which comes on the render, and then and only then we are getting the data we are getting from the network request. And this is, a little bit weird because this code gets executed before the render. But in this case, we are getting first the render and then the data. So now if I wanted to grab the response we are getting from here and inject it as props, this will not work. And again, this makes sense. And let me give you a dumb example because with all of this code, it's a little bit confusing. So I'm going to do just a set timeout. And this is, again, standard JavaScript. So we're going to pass a function, and then this function, we're going to do something, and I'm going to do it after 2 seconds. All right. So I'm going to go and say console.log and say timeout. Now, this is how JavaScript works. JavaScript, whenever you execute JavaScript something or statement or whatever, or function, this one, JavaScript is going to read this file, it's going to go here, it's going to reach this section, and it's going to say, oh, okay, so I need to trigger a function in 2 seconds. Now, JavaScript will not stop on this statement. It's not going to say, oh, okay, so I'm going to wait until the 2 seconds are done, and then I'm going to keep executing the rest of the code. It's going to do this, and it's going to send this function to the end of the queue, the end of the stack. And this code is going to be on a very special place, but it's not going to get executed because it needs to wait 2 seconds. So JavaScript is going to send this to the queue, and then it's going to keep moving forward and executing the rest of the code. Now, the problem is that the code that we have right here, we kind of really need it in order to move forward. So we kind of need, let me just go back to the previous example, we need a way to tell Next that when we have an initial props and then an Axios with a get, request, and everything else, we need to say, Next, whenever you get this, I want you to stop whatever you're doing and wait until you get a response from the server. Once you get a response from the server, then and only then you can move forward and pass the data as a return, as a response. So we need a way to do that. So let's go to the next section and solve the mystery. All right, so how can we solve the mystery? How can we tell Next to wait until this is done before we move forward to the actual component with the data inside of the object? So we use async and await, very simple. So by using async and await, we need to go to get initial props and tell get initial props that this one has an async action. And then of course we need to use try and catch. So I'm going to do try and I'm going to do catch, just like this. All right. So once we are done getting the information we want, I'm going to store it on a variable called user and then data. You could call this whatever you want, doesn't matter. Okay, so first we need to go to the try scenario. So I'm going to copy this line and I'm going to delete it. We don't really need it. So I'm going to go here and I'm going to say response. So we're going to trigger this. Now again, we need to let the application know that we need to await until this request is done. So we need to say await at the beginning. Now once this is done, of course, the response will return a response. So I'm going to go to this user data, and I'm going to say that the user data, once this request is done, it's equal to the response that we are getting from that request and the data. And of course, if we get an error, we're just going to say console log, and I'm just going to say error. Doesn't matter right now. If something happens on the way, we are going to get the catch scenario. So now, of course, the application starts, is going to do and wait until this request is done, and the user data will contain the information we are requesting. So then at the at the end of the day, that one, it's going to get included right here. But before, I would like to just confirm that this works. So I'm going to go and just do console log user data. Now remember that at the bottom we are doing a console log of this state. So by doing this, we should be getting first the user data and then and only then that state, right? That's why we are using async and wait. So I'm going to save it. I'm going to reload the application. And if we go to the server, we can see that first we are getting the user data and then we are getting the state. All right. So, that works. So now since we are storing everything on user data, what I could do, I could say, okay, so when I return an object, I want to return a property with user. I'm going to leave that. And I'm going to say, I want to add the user data. So now when the application renders our component, we have it inside props. We, can access this.props and user data. And I'm gonna put it on the state. So I'm gonna call this user and data, doesn't matter. And it's equals to this.props and user data. All right. So now, instead of getting this console log, I'm just gonna delete it. We should be getting one console log for everything, which is the console log this state that contains the user data. So if, again, I reload this, we get the user and we get the user data with everything we need. All right, really, really cool. So again, what is the point of doing all of this? Well, now, instead of doing using the life cycles to make a request just like this, and re-render the whole application once you get the data, and then repopulate all the code that it's using that state, you just do it once. You do it from the server, and whenever it's done, then you render your application only one time with all the data you need pre-fetch it. That's the main point of doing all of this. All right, so we get much more features with getInitialProps. So let's go to the next one and talk about these features. Okay, so when you work with the getInitialProps, you get access to something called the context. So the context is just an argument that is going to get passed to this function that contains all the information of what is happening with, the task that you're performing with the actual request. So let me just show you, and I'm going to say context, of course. And then I'm going to go right here at the bottom, and I'm going to do console log, and I'm going to console log the context. Now I'm going to remove the other console logs because they are just in the way. And I'm just doing a console log of the context. So I'm going to save this. I'm going to reload the application. Let me just delete this. I was trying it. And I am at home. I made a request. And notice that on the terminal, you're going to get kind of a big object. So all of this is just the information of what's happening with your actual request. Notice that you even get the headers. So maybe you have experience working with servers, maybe a Node or Express server, and you know that when you create a route, you do have access to the request and the response and everything else. Well, this is pretty much the same idea. So again, in real life, you're not going to use this, big object. You're just going to use some parts of this. Since we are working with JavaScript, we can use the 6 magic to do a little bit of destructuring and just bring, the things we want. And most of the times when you work with this, you want the URLs. Maybe you have some queries right here at the top, and you want to bring it from the actual request. So you can use destructuring. And let's say I want to bring the path name, or maybe the query. This is if we have query strings. Then we have the as path, which is pretty much the same thing as query, but in a different format. And then you still get the access to the request and the response. So let me just do console log of path name and see what we get. So I'm going to reload the application. And I'm going to go all the way to the bottom. And notice that we have right here, our request. Let me do it again. Path name, I'm going to reload it. And there we go. So we get a /. And this is the path name telling us that we are at home, which is, /. If we would do this from contact, we're going to get /contact because it's a path name. So same thing with the other ones. So let me just copy this one. And I'm going to say, okay, query. I'm going to say query. I'm going to reload the application, and we're going to get object null. And we're going to get an empty object. And this is, you can use this if you have query strings. For example, let me say, hello name. And we should be getting right here the object with the hello name. So now you can make a reference to this value so you can get it from the URL. Same thing with the as path. Is the same idea. Let me just copy this and paste it at the bottom. So as path, and I'm going to remove this. Of course, this file is going to go to you. It's going to reload the application, and we get pretty much the same idea, but on a string format. And then, of course, you can still get access to the actual request, which is the pretty long string that you have right here that we previously seen. So, really, really cool stuff. Okay, so, now we know a little bit more about what's happening right here. Okay, so I want to show you something else. Let me just, all right. So right now we are using getInitialProps from a class-based component. And, we know that this works. But what happens if we do it on a functional component? Do we still get access to use get initial props? Yeah, we do, but it's a little bit different. We need to set it up on a different way. So I'm going to go to users and I'm going to go to profile. I'm going to do it on profile. So if I go to the URL, which is users / profile, right? If I'm not wrong, profile. Yeah, we get profile. So I'm going to change this to a functional component. I'm going to do const. This one is going to be equal open and close. And then we need to remove the render because that's from a class. And this one, we'll be getting props later. So I'm going to say props. All right. So now we have a functional component. So if I reload the application, we still get, the keyword profile. So we get access to get initial props, but we cannot use it inside of this function because this is just a function. We cannot put it here. So what we need to do is we need to do it on a different way. I'm going to go at the bottom, after the function. You could do it before. You need to say profile, make a mention to the function that you're using, and then you say get initial props. Initial and then props. And this one, it's equal to, and you can use it just like a function. Now, most of the times, you're going to use it with async, so you will need to put the async right here. And of course, since you get access right here to everything that it's happening, you still get access right here. So if I wanted to bring the request, this is all I have to do. And of course, you just like the class-based component, you still need to return an object. Doesn't matter if it's an empty object or just an object with something. You need to return something. So I'm going to say return, and I'm going to say something dumb, maybe values, and I don't know, 1, 2, 1, I don't know, 2, 3, and 4. Doesn't matter. So now, of course, we should be getting this object inside props. That's the main purpose of doing all of this. So if I go here and say, dude, I want to do a console log of whatever I get inside props and reload the application, I'm going to get, and we're going to talk about this later, we're going to get the values with 1, 2, 3, 4. So very, very cool. All right, I just wanted to show you this because sometimes we don't need to use a class-based component. It's much better to do a functional component. Okay, so let's go to the next one. We're going to change the topic. We're going to talk about styles. All right, so one of the most important things is that when you create a web, is that you need to use the styles, right? You need to add some CSS. If not, it's going to be ugly just like this. So with Next, you get different ways of working with styles. You get many, many ways. Okay, so I'm going to show you different ways. Let's go to the first one. I'm going to close everything. I'm going to go and do this on the contact right here. So the first way is just use inline stylings. I know that I'm not teaching you anything new, but you can still use inline stylings for React. And this is just React. It's not Next. So let's say, hello, guys, whatever. So I'm going to save it. I'm going to go to the contact page, contact, and we get hello, guys, with, the inline stylings. Again, I'm not teaching you anything new. But of course, you can use it if you want. Now, the second method, we get a built-in support with Next with the library called styled JSX. It's not my favorite, but it comes with Next. So let me go here and find it on the web. It's called styled, something like that, and JSX, and I'm gonna say Next. So you're gonna get it right here, full CSS support for JSX without compromises. That's cool. Now, notice that the developer of this, it's Site. So Site, it's the actual developer of Next. They own Next. So, yeah. Okay. So we can install this. Actually, we don't need to install it. It's already built in. So if I scroll down right here, it will give you the installation rules. And we don't need to do this. And this is because you can use this component, this library, on different things, not just Next. So it's a little bit weird. Let me just show you, and you're going to get it. And then, of course, don't worry, I'm going to give you different ways. We are not going to use this one. But again, I need to, since I'm teaching, I need to tell you that you have this available. So first, I'm going to create a different div. And just a div. And this one, it's going to, let me close it first. And this one is going to say, I don't know, styles with and styled JSX. Right. So we're going to need to add a class name. So I'm going to add a class name, something that makes sense, maybe JSX styled or something like that. Styled. Yeah. Right. Okay. Sorry for that. So now, of course, if I reload the application, nothing happens. We need to give it some style. So the way we do this is that inside the component, we need to add a style tag. And I know, kind of sucks, but that's the way it works. So then, of course, I'm going to make a reference to the actual style. And I'm going to say that this one, the color, it's actually blue. All right. And as you can see, we are getting an error. And it's because we don't use it this way. It's a little bit weird. So I'm going to copy this. I'm going to remove it, and I'm going to say, okay, so this style is for the JSX. So now the library, the style JSX, knows that it needs to read this. So this one, we need to add it on a curly braces, and we need to wrap everything as a string. And I told you it was going to be weird. But yeah, that's the way it works. So then, of course, only then we can add this as a string. So JSX, the styled component, is going to parse all of this information and it's going to, make it work. Now, of course, I need to delete this. I just need to pass blue. So if we go right here, we kind of get it. So it works really, really well. The only weird thing is that we are getting, this ugly, markup. And sometimes you have big components, so maybe you don't want this, and you will need to create a different file to import this component. So you could do this just like we are doing with header. You just create a file with all of this code, you include it, make a reference right here, and they will get injected into this component. That's one way to do it. Okay, so it works really good. Not my favorite. And notice, let me just show you because we have time. If I go to the head, right here we get the data styled JSX. So it's going to inject all the styles on the header, on the head. So we get it right here. Right, really cool. So we get it right here. It's going to add an ID and everything else. So right, that's the way it works, how JSX styled works. And again, remember it comes built in so you can use it without no installation. Right, so then we have a third method. And that method is going to be the old school way of linking style sheets. Now, the thing is that, as you noticed, all our application is working with an include with the header and an include with the main layout. And so we are kind of using the main layout as a wrapper of pretty much our whole application. So where are we going to put the the link to the CSS? Because we don't have that. We don't have the structure of getting the HTML with the head and everything else. We don't have that available. Next, it's kind of doing that for us. So we're going to do it on the main layout. The thing is, again, we just cannot grab whatever we want and put it right here because Next will not identify that right here we have a link with an href, which is going to be our CSS. Let me do it like this. Let me see if I can find it. There we go. And then we have a rel of style sheet. Let me do it. Style sheet. And then we close it, of course. So Next cannot know that you want to put this on the actual head. Right? It's doing this for us. So we need a way to tell that we want to grab some markup, some content, some static files, or whatever, and we want to put this code inside of the head. So for this one, we get a component from Next, just like we were getting with the other component. I don't remember right now. So we're going to go here at the bottom, and I'm going to say, okay, I want to import, and the name of the component is head. And we need to bring it from, and we bring it from Next / and then head. So now I can bring this component called head that comes from Next, and whatever I put inside of the head, Next is going to read it and it's going to put it inside of the head. So if I do, for example, the title, we don't have a title. Let me do title and my awesome app. Next, it's going to read this and it's going to say, oh, okay, so he's using this component, so I should grab this content and put it on the head. So of course, if we go right here, going to reload the application. If I go to the head, notice that we get right here my awesome app. So we get my awesome app and it's linking the style sheet. So really, really cool stuff. Okay, so what I'm gonna do, we're gonna make this application better, much better actually. So I'm gonna add some fonts, maybe some maybe a Roboto font or something like that, and I'm gonna add Bootstrap. Then we're gonna make this application a little bit better. So I'm gonna go to fonts, Google, and I'm gonna bring the fonts. If you don't want to do this, fine by me. That's okay. So I'm gonna bring the Roboto. I'm gonna bring it. I'm gonna go here, and I'm gonna just copy the link and paste it right here. Now, first of all, let me just customize it. I'm gonna bring the maybe the light, the medium, and the bold. And now I'm gonna paste it. Sorry for that. All right. So there we go. And now what I want to do, I want to bring the, let me just go back. I did something wrong. All right, let me fix it. So what I need to do, and it's actually giving me, telling me that I need to close it. That's okay. Okay, so now what I want to do, I want to bring Bootstrap. So I'm going to bring this from Next.js and then Bootstrap. And I'm going to bring whatever Bootstrap, doesn't matter right now. All right, so I'm going to get the Bootstrap and then the min CSS. This is the one I want. So I'm going to copy, I'm going to paste it right here at the bottom, and I'm going to pretty much do the same thing. Just going to copy this one, paste it. So you should do the same. If not, your application later is going to look really, really ugly. All right, so everything looks pretty nice. So now, of course, if we reload the application, we get right here Bootstrap, and we get the Roboto. And as you notice, something is changing right here. So now we have one more problem, right? So we are doing all of this. The main purpose of doing all of this is to add our own styles, right? Okay, so where do we put the CSS files? So where do I need to make a reference to a path. Where is that, path is going to be? Where I'm going to put it? So just like the pages, Next needs a place where, of course, we need to put all the styles. All right. So just like the pages, we need a place called static. That's the name of the directory. So Next knows that if you have static files like JavaScript, images, whatever kind of a file, is going to go and search it on this static directory. It works again just like pages. So okay, so what I want to do, I want to go to static. I want to create a directory called CSS, and I'm going to put just some dumb CSS inside. So I'm going to say maybe styles.css, and I'm going to say contact. And let me just add a class with something dumb, contact underscore static. And I'm going to say that the color of this one is going to be green, right? Okay. So now I'm going to go to the actual contact, and I'm going to add this, the div with that class. So this one is going to be class name. And this is, of course, we are doing this so we can confirm that this works, of course. So static. And right here, we're going to say styles with static CSS. Cool. So now I believe this was the class. Yes. Okay. So now, of course, we need to make a reference to that, that path. So this one is going to be inside /static /CSS / and then styles.css. And that's it. So if I, of course, reload the application, we are kind of getting the content right here. So really cool. Now, most of the times, and let me just go back to the main layout. Most of the times, right here, you get the head, and we know that is a head. And we get pretty much no reference to the body right here. Now, we know that everything that it's inside here, header, and whatever content that comes after the head, it's going to be part of the body. So again, most of the times, we create, or you developers create a place where you're going to be putting all the contents, and then, we just add a div, since we don't have access to create just a body because that's being taken care of by Next. I'm going to call it main layout, something like that, and then container, something dumb. I'm going to put everything inside of that div. So this div becomes our body. All right, everything still works. All right, so very, very cool. So one more thing before we move on to the next topic is going to be that, of course, you can add whatever you want right here. What happens if I wanted to add an image? And an image is going to be a static file. So it is a static file. So you need to put it on static. So you can make a reference to static within a component, right? Just like you would do with any web application. So okay, I'm gonna pause the video and bring in an image. You will need to do the same. So go to the web and bring whatever image. Doesn't matter. Okay, so I've added a directory inside static called images, and I've added a Knicks image. As you know, I'm a very big fan of the NBA and the Knicks. And yeah, I know they suck. Okay, so how can we make a reference to that static file? So pretty simple. If I wanted to add just an image, I will just maybe include a div, and then I'm going to say, okay, I want to bring an image, and then the src is going to be / same place. We're going to go to static, we're going to go to images, and then the name of the image. And that's it. That's the only way it works. So if I go here, we get the image of my Knicks. Okay, so pretty cool. 3 different ways: inline, by using the JSX styled, not my favorite, and then using just inline, just the imports. Not the imports, the usual old school way of bringing files. So okay, so that works. Now we get more ways of using CSS. Maybe you're kind of a import CSS guy, or maybe Sass or Less or Stylus. So we get different ways with Next of working to work with that kind of files. So let's go to the next one and find out.